Hello, builders of good. Thank you for tuning in to the Build Good Fundraising podcast. Fundraising isn't easy, but it should be simple. So on this show, we take the mystery out of raising money. Now, on every episode, we coach you to build your fundraising like a flywheel. The flywheel has 5 steps. Number 1 is listening to donors, both quantitative and qualitative data. Number 2 is engaging them and gathering in community. Number 3 is asking the right people for the right things. Number 4 is celebrating every gift. And number 5 is reporting back. And once you've done that, you have earned the right to ask again. If you master the 5 parts of the flywheel, your fundraising will start to spin reliably like a flywheel with less effort on your part. Your revenue will grow, and so will your career. Now, every week we focus on one part of the flywheel. Today, we're kind of focusing on all of them because we are talking about email and how to use email for all 5 parts of the flywheel. Email remains one of the most effective digital fundraising channels, but it can be kind of tough to know if you're doing it right. Like, how do you balance these 5 parts of the flywheel with emails? How do you balance asking for money, like showing gratitude, celebrating, reporting back on impact, surveying your donors? How much email is too much email? Or how much email is too little email? Are you not communicating enough? Are you communicating too much? What sorts of things should you look at to know whether to increase or decrease your frequency? What kind of content should you focus on? So in this week's Build Good Live, we're helping you audit your current email program, your current email marketing strategy. We're going to do a bit of an audit on it, help you audit it, and then also give you some surefire ways to increase donor engagement. We're talking to Katelyn Baughan. She's the owner of KB Digital, a nonprofit email marketing agency. And she's helped some of the most well-known nonprofits with their email marketing. And she's got experience in all marketing verticals, but email is her favorite. She focuses on it exclusively. She's an expert in it. So let's get right into it. Here's my conversation with Katelyn Baughan. Katelyn, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
I feel like I know you really well from LinkedIn, but this is actually the first time that we're chatting. I just feel like I already know who you are.
Yeah, same.
So we're completely channel agnostic at Build Good. However, we often end up talking about email on this podcast. And I think it's because email is one of the easiest channels that, like, after you're listening to this pod, you can turn it off, like fire up MailChimp or ConvertKit or whatever you're using, and you can actually like get something out within 5 minutes if you wanted to. It is actually a fairly easy medium to get out the door and fairly easy medium to test. You sort of get pretty immediate feedback on it, within a few days. Some other marketing verticals, it takes you like forever to kind of see whether it's working or not. Why do you focus on email? Just give us a bit of your lens, your story.
Okay. Yeah. There's really 4 reasons why I love email, or the 4 top reasons, I should say. The first one being that out of all the marketing channels, email is reported to have the highest ROI. So for every dollar you spend on email, $36 will be returned to you. And so that's a huge reason why. Second reason why is because of email's unique ability to target subscribers with a very personalized and relevant message. It just makes it the best channel to drive revenue and improve your supporter loyalty. The third reason why is because you own your list and you don't have to worry about algorithms like social. And so your list is people that are signing up to say, we want to hear from you, or they've done something to say they want to hear from you. And so you don't feel like you're just sending a message out into whether it be social and hoping that people see it and act on it. And people have actually reported, there are many studies that report that they prefer their communication through email. So those are the 4 reasons why. If people are saying they prefer their communication via email, you better be communicating with them regularly and consistently through email.
All right. So regularly and consistently, let's pick up there. One
Okay.
of the services you offer is an email audit where you sit down with an organization, you look at their entire program and you do a bit of a diagnostic. You look at what they're doing and you identify ways where they can grow, improve, find more efficiencies, and get better at their fundraising and marketing. So let's pretend that we're doing an email audit on this
Yeah.
podcast. So where do we start? Like Katelyn's coming in, she's sitting down with us. Where do we start? Like we're all, and as we're listening to this, we can all think of our own email program in our head, the things we're doing at our shop right now. So Katelyn walks in, where do we start?
Yeah, audits are a really great way to uncover areas for improvement, as well as find out what works, what's been working, and more importantly, what's not working for you. As nonprofits, I think we're trying to do everything, and some things aren't working. And we have to be willing to look at the data, see the story it's telling, and say, okay, we've spent a lot of time and energy on X, Y, and Z, and we're not getting out of it what we were hoping to be getting out of it. So let's discontinue or maybe improve this in some way. And so I love doing audits. Usually when I start with clients, that's where we start. The first thing you want to do when you're starting an audit, there's really 5 steps that I take. The first step is defining what your goals of the audit are. So asking yourself before we do the audit, what is it that you want to learn about, your email marketing program? What specific problems are you encountering? Is it engagement? Is it fund, like you're not getting the amount of dollars you want to be getting out of specific fundraising campaigns? And what are you hoping to learn at the end of the audit that you don't know now? Like, what does success look like to you? Because if you don't start with the goals of the audit, it's very easy for you to go down like rabbit holes because there's so much data for you to look at. And so really honing in on like, what is it that you want to get out of this? And so an example would be if you want to do a better job engaging your audience, success would look like figuring out what types of content certain audiences engage with and creating a strategy to do more of that and setting maybe benchmarks for engagement through this audit. That's just one example, but starting with the goal in mind is really important.
All right. So you said something just interesting. Email can return $36 for every dollar you spend on it. So let's say that our goal is, you know what, we're not even close to there. Like we're spending $1, maybe we're getting 2 back. The 36 number sounds amazing. If I had a machine at home, I put in $1 and 36 comes back to me. I'd be standing there all day long putting in dollars, right? I was going to say putting in loonies, but you're American. That's a Canadian that's a Canadian reference. So let's say that is our goal of the audit. It's not performing as well as we'd like to in terms of our fundraising. So that's our goal of the audit. What is the next step?
I would want to look at the health of your overall database. I'm going to go over a few ways that I do that. And I have, Mike, I'll give you this free template. It's a spreadsheet that everyone can use that really will show you how your database is doing in general. And so looking at how many contacts you have, first of all, in your email database, and how many contacts have you emailed in the last 12, 6, and 3 months. And so that will help you understand if there are groups that you're missing out on, which is very common too, where you have this big database, but certain groups are not getting engaged with over the last, 12, 6, or 3 months. And then how many contacts are inactive or active in the last 12, 6, and 3 months? So contacts, if they haven't been opening or clicking emails or filling out forms, if they're not active, actually, getting the email and acting on it, then we want to figure that out too, because it could be a good practice to suppress some of those inactive contacts. Like if they have not been clicking on your emails the last year, then they're actually bringing all of your numbers down. And so something as simple as suppressing those inactive contacts could increase your click-through and conversion rates as well.
Got it. Yeah, let's define a few terms real quick.
Sure.
When you talk about database, look at your email database. Are you saying It's going to be different for every nonprofit. But are
Yeah.
you saying like, look at your like MailChimp or Campaign Monitor or whatever it is? Or are you saying look at your overall, like the CRM that you're using or
Damn.
both?
I think it's definitely your email service provider. I say database. I know that there's CRM, and then there's CRMs that have the email functionality within it. So wherever your emails live, let's look at that. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And then let's define inactive donors. You talked about maybe suppressing inactive donors or subscribers. What would you consider inactive? How do we define that?
So a lot of different email service providers will actually do that for you. They'll have, when you are reporting, it will say you have how many are inactive. But typically it's anyone who hasn't taken an action on your email. An action can be clicking. Some email service providers will tell you if they've read your email, so they can tell if someone has stayed on that email for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, how long they've been on it. Maybe they clicked something in the header or the footer, or they made a donation. That is what I would consider to be active or inactive. What do you think?
Yeah,
Would
pretty much the
you
same.
agree? Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can quickly talk about open rates as an action. Do
Sure.
you, since all the changes with how that is tracked with iOS, do you even look at that, or is that just kind of like, nah, take that with a grain of salt? It's not as accurate as it used to be. Let's just more so focus on click-throughs or on other metrics.
Yeah, like you said, with the iOS update, we just know that those open rates are no longer reliable, unfortunately. It's good to have and take it with a grain of salt for sure. I always focus on click-through rates as the main point of analysis, because that's actually proving that someone did open and did click. It's just a really strong data point, in my opinion.
Yep. Okay. So we want to raise more money with email. That's our goal. We looked at our list in our email service provider. We identified that, hey, there's like all these people who are actually like kind of inactive. They're not engaging with us at all. They're like cold, they clearly something isn't working. Should we suppress them? Should we give it, one more good try to re-engage them somehow? How do we treat that audience first? And then we will talk about the quote unquote active audience next.
I don't think that you should just suppress them altogether. I think we should give them just like one last shot, because I do know that behavior can be different for everybody. Like, for example, I sign up for tons of other nonprofit email lists just to see what's happening and keep things top of mind, but I don't always have the time to actually read them. But I like to have them in my inbox. And so just giving people that option, maybe setting up a 3-week series of emails to allow them to resubscribe or take an action to stay on the list. And then after you give them that opportunity, I think you just feel a little bit better about suppressing them after that, because you gave them the option and didn't just assume they didn't want to hear from you.
Yeah. So kind of you're talking about this little series that kind of like tries to re-engage them. We've seen many nonprofits do that. At some point you get an email, it's got a subject line that's something like one last time, or like, is this goodbye, or something like that. And you open it up and it's like, you realize that they've actually been trying to contact you for 3 weeks. You just haven't opened any of them. And they're just honest about the fact that like, hey, if this is no longer a good fit for you, after a few days, we'll just remove you from the list. And thanks for all the memories. Something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you seen those re-engage lapsed subscribers or inactive subscribers?
Not usually.
And I think that's okay.
It just makes you feel better, right? Like you gave them that last shot. And the thing is that as nonprofits, we're spending a lot of these CRMs or the email service providers, they charge you by how many contacts you have in your database. And so you're wasting money on these people that maybe don't want to hear from you anymore. And so, yeah. And depending on which technology you're using, I had a client using HubSpot, which is pretty pricey. And we found out we just made a lot more money for them, saved money for them by getting rid of some of those seats.
Yeah, especially for orgs who run a lot of peer-to-peer fundraising events. Sometimes, you wake up one day and you have 20,000 email addresses in your system that you're paying for. And
Mhm.
some of them made a donation 5 years ago to Sarah's birthday fundraiser.
Yeah.
They might not even be friends with Sarah anymore. They have no idea who you are. They just sort of ended up in your email database because they made a
Yes.
gift 5 years ago. And if you're not regularly trying to clean some of those out, you'll end up with this really bogged down email database of inactive subscribers.
Yeah. You mentioned the peer-to-peer list. That is a challenge for every nonprofit I've worked with.
Yeah.
Like that peer-to-peer group, they just are not engaging the same way that your normal supporters are. It's just an interesting thing that you brought up that I've noticed too.
Yep. All right, so that takes care of the inactive subscribers. Feel good about that. We identified people who really haven't interacted with us for a long time. We put them in an automated series for about 3 weeks to try to re-engage them. We gave them a shot. We let them know we're going to be removing you from the list. Great. Now what we've got left is a more so active audience, and we still want to audit them to see how can we raise more money. What do we do with this active audience?
My third step for an email audit is to look at your segmentations and your lists. So actually list out each segment that you have, because what we know is that segmentation and personalization are the best ways to get more engagement, more funds. Like you're emailing people in a way that you show them you care about what they're interested in based off of past interactions, past behaviors, past gifts, that kind of thing. And so looking at segmentations and lists is a huge thing. And so list them out. And again, I have a template that I'll share with you that people can use. And then see how each of those are performing, each segment. What improvements can you make to your segmentation? Do you need new segments? Are there some segments that you can get rid of? And so that's a great way to move forward in this audit. An example would be with one of my clients, we had noticed that lapsed donors had the highest click-through rates on all of their fundraising campaigns. And we thought that was really interesting, something that is kind of out of the blue. Like, why are these people that are lapsed all of a sudden clicking on all the emails, but they're not giving? And so that just unveiled a big opportunity in my eyes for this group of people. They're showing you they're interested, they're not giving to you. And so is there a way to maybe create a specialized campaign or a personalized campaign for this segment to get them to convert in some way, or to deepen the relationship, or to re-engage them in a way that you haven't done in the past? So by doing this, you can really see those signals. You'll be able to kind of see, is there something that you can uncover from those segments?
Yeah. Do we segment by behavior, by interest, by giving history? What are some of the ways that people can start to think about segmentation? Most people are just mailing everybody on the list everything, right? So what are some ways we can start to think about segmentation?
There are several ways. I think the goal is to be able to segment by behavior, but that can be difficult to do. And so start with three segments, like your donors, your volunteers, and maybe people who've attended your events, your peer-to-peer people. So things that you want to communicate with these people in a specific way, and then you can get more granular over time. So with donors, you can have your major donors, your monthly donors, your lapsed donors, your one-time gifts. That kind of granularity will be helpful if you're ready for it. But I know that with small shops, it can be kind of scary to think about all of the segments, and you don't want too many segments. So my suggestion is to look at your organization, think about how you're communicating with people, and segment it, how it makes sense for you and your audience.
Right. So that's segmentation. How about personalization?
Okay, so personalization is a little bit deeper. If somebody is downloading something from your organization, they're signaling to you that they're interested in whatever it is that they downloaded. And in this day and age, we really expect for organizations to learn from our actions. And a great example of that is like, Amazon or,
Mhm.
think about the big guys. We're not the big guys, but it feels good to get an email from them that's like, you were looking at this shoe and you bought this shoe. We think you would like this new shoe that came out that looks like that one, is similar to that one, and is your style. And so if people are, if they're attending an event per se, like if they're coming to a fundraising event, they're interested probably more in like coming to events or getting involved rather than making a donation. And so the way that you're communicating with them should be personalized based off of things that they've done in the past or actions they've taken that you're learning from, and really like delighting them with those things. So one of my clients, the National Breast Cancer Foundation, they do a really great job of providing ebooks to cancer survivors about how they can, overcome certain challenges. And it's probably their number one source of leads. But those people are interested, yes, in the organization. They want that resource, but maybe they don't want to be asked to make a donation. And so every time a new resource comes out, they would email those people saying, you downloaded this resource. We just came out with this new resource.
Yeah.
We think that you'll love. And it's very personalized in that journey. And that works really well.
Yeah, I don't know if you've found this. We're entering this interesting era that has a unique challenge, which is that more and more people are more concerned about privacy.
Yeah.
How much you know about them, and at the same time expect more and more personalization. So they will tell you, don't collect that on me, don't want all the cookie stuff. I don't know what you're collecting me. I don't want you to use your data in a perceived way to use against me, even though that's not actually what is happening. But that's
Yeah.
sometimes this perceived threat of like data collection. They're going to use it against me somehow. And at the same time, when you get something that's unpersonalized, is, well, you should know me. How come you don't know this about me? This sounds tone deaf, right?
Mhm.
So that's an interesting challenge to overcome. This is as an aside, I was standing in line to renew my passport, and the guy in front of me was complaining about like big government and how,
Mm.
because we had to wear masks to go into this federal building. And he was just going on and on about how the government knows way too much about you. And then like he's kind of quiet for 2 minutes and he's like, why do I have to stand in line anyways to renew my passport? They should just know that my passport is going to expire and send me a new one, right? Which is like this human behavior
Yeah.
of like, we're not even aware of it, but we've got these two dual interests sometimes. Maybe this is something you're struggling with as well, but how do you navigate through that with donors? Which is like, we want to be as personalized as possible. At the same time, we want to respect your preference for a lot of privacy.
Yeah. The struggle is real. I don't really have an answer. I think that we just need to, like change our mindsets on it. I think that like, because all this privacy stuff is coming out, as fundraisers, as marketers, it can be easy to all of a sudden have like a fear-based mindset. I'm not going to send this because people are going to think it's creepy, or like you said, the privacy is really important. And so I think if you're providing really valuable resources, valuable content, and you're building the trust is there, then I think you'll see that people will care less. And if you as a nonprofit are communicating that you're doing everything you can to keep their data safe and secure, then I think that people will trust you more. And you kind of have to be like almost like an investigator, like do some testing, sending things, seeing how it performs. Surveys do really well. And so, when someone is giving a donation, that's signaling that they want more from you and they care about your cause. And so building that trust is going to be vital right away off the bat, letting them know how your donation is making an impact and how we're keeping your data safe, asking them, having like a new donor survey in that welcome series is a great way to like get some more information from them, and asking them like, how much do you want to be communicated with? I know that's something that was a topic of discussion in this, like how much email is too much email. Well, ask your people, ask them like straight up, get it from the source, call them up if you have to, if you're not sure, send them a survey. How much do you want to hear from me? Like, where would you like your communication to come from? Not everybody is the same. You could segment also by age, or, because different generations like their information in different ways. And so just being an investigator and like getting that data from them and finding out, what do they prefer, and asking them, I think, is always the best way.
Yeah, love that. In our new donor welcome series, like email number 1 is obviously like gratitude and welcome to the team. Email number 2 is like, here's our promise to you. And it's like, depending on the org, 3 to 5 sort of promise statements. But 2 of them are about privacy and respect. And then the email ends with, I want to hear from you. And then email 3, again, is a reply back email, very much trying to get people to reply to an email with their own opinion and their own feedback, and getting some intel that way. All right, so we've set our goal. We have looked at our audiences, active and inactive. We've looked at how much we've sent them over the years. Then over the last 6 to 12 months, we have segmented and we have personalized. We still want to raise more money. What is the next step?
Okay, so there's 2 more steps left. The 4th step is to review your individual emails and campaigns. So I want you to, again, in a spreadsheet, because I love spreadsheets, I want you to look at your campaigns in the last year. Specifically, if your goal is fundraising, let's look at fundraising campaigns. Although I do want to say that emails that are not, the goal is not fundraising, are just as important, right? Because you can't just like not email anybody all year and then all of a sudden be like, it's end of the year, give me your money. And so they're all important, but let's look at the fundraising campaigns. Which campaigns did you run last year? How did they perform? And then I want you to separate them into different categories, because specific emails like welcome series or monthly donor emails may see a higher engagement than like promotional emails or newsletters or transactional emails. So you shouldn't measure every email against the same standards, right? So let's separate them into categories. You have your transactional emails, your promotional emails, your newsletters, your automated emails. Figure out what those categories are specific to your organization, because every organization is different. You can analyze better what worked and didn't work based off of those specific emails. Fundraising emails would also be a category if we're talking about fundraising as the goal. And then you can actually pull the data for all of your fundraising emails, like sort it and see which ones did well, which ones didn't do well. And you will, I promise, uncover some gems just by putting the information and sorting it together in a way that is easy to digest and see. One of my clients has the highest click-through rate on their newsletter. And so this just reinforced, when you separate it out to newsletter category, that category had the highest click-through rates compared to the other ones. And so this just like reinforces that the newsletter is worth the work. It's a lot of work to put together a newsletter every month. But if you have the data that's proving like, actually our audience loves this, they're clicking on it more than any other email, then you can feel confident about the resources you're putting into that specific, program or whatever.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you might find other types of emails like peer-to-peer, for example, that maybe are not performing well, and you're spending all this time putting it together and you're not getting out of it what you want. Then you can make a more informed decision to either improve it by some way or discontinue it. Like, don't be afraid to stop doing things that are not working for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, discontinue it. Hannah on our team says we should sunset that. I was like, oh, that's such a nice way of saying it. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. Yeah, so we've got the 5 buckets that we look at emails through, which is listen, engage, ask, celebrate, and report. And for one of our clients, just yesterday, we were looking at some emails, and the report back emails had like the highest reply back rate, like people like actually hitting reply back to the CEO. And that's one of those qualitative, like, yeah, what's a reply worth? It's going to be hard to quantify that in any way, but
Right.
just reading through the responses, it's like these emails are worth the effort because people are literally replying back to you, thanking you for the work you do, or saying how grateful they are to be part of it. So yeah, coming up with some categories, buckets, whatever you want to call it, and then doing a bit of a pattern analysis or pattern match, you'll find some good intel. What is the last step in the audit?
Okay. The last step, because you can't really move forward without, you've done all this analysis. Now what? Now we need to figure out what are our key performance indicators moving forward. So you're going to see everything you learned and create some KPIs. So choose metrics that you're going to evaluate how your overall program is doing, how your individual emails are doing, those categories, what makes an email successful. So you're picking those key performance indicators, and that will hopefully help you achieve that goal, going back to step one of this email audit. And we were talking about this earlier, Mike, about benchmarks, right? So one of my clients are always like, well, what are the benchmarks? Like, what should we be comparing our KPIs to in the sector, in the nonprofit world? And I think while benchmarks are a great way to measure where you're at compared to other nonprofits, it's important to really just like look at your own data and figure out your people. This is a unique set of people. Your goal and your mission is unique. And so they're not going to be like everybody else's. And so yes, it's great to look at other benchmarks just to see where you're at. But like, if your goal from the first step is to get more engagement, and the click-through rates for your newsletter last year, click-through rates usually are a good data point or metric to look at for engagement, was like 0.5%, which is kind of low. Maybe your new KPI is like 1%. And maybe that's under like what, like M&R's email report is telling you as a benchmark. But for you, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start somewhere that is like manageable, I guess. And I think we easily get overwhelmed looking at everybody else's data and being like, well, we're not doing good enough. And we suck at email. Well, just start somewhere, just start with like a 0.5% or whatever.
It is so tempting to look at all the big flashy reports. There's M&R in terms of fundraising in general. There's Giving USA. There's a fundraising effectiveness project. There's all these reports that come out throughout the year. And myself included, I look forward to them. I like reading them. I like seeing what's going on. But we go, donors down, dollars up, or like, like participation is down here. Oh, it's been halved over the last 10 years. Or like, M&R says your unsub rate should be less than 1%. Well, there's a few problems with evaluating yourself against those reports. One is they're not peer organizations in those reports. There might be some peer organizations, but it's an overall report that it oftentimes includes the eds and the meds, like big education institutions, big medical institutions, completely different ballgame than what many small shops are playing, right? So you're comparing yourself against a data set that might not be the right data set to compare yourself against to. And unless it's a peer organization that is similar work you do, depending on the org and the mission, location makes a difference, in the same growth stage that you're in, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to compare yourself against that data set. The most important data set is right in front of you. It's your people. They're in your database. Get on the phone, talk to them, book a couple of coffees and lunches. I promise you, after you've talked to 10 people, just 10 people, you will already have a higher definition picture of your database. And if you talk to 100 people, 100 people can't be wrong. Like if you talk to 100 of your donors, if you just make that a goal, that's a pretty good data set. And you might find that you stop learning new things at person number 40. And once you stop learning new things, you've got a pretty good idea of who your donors are. So great point. Talk to the people right in front of you. It's you versus you out here. It's you improving on your own results, not necessarily against data that includes, how Harvard is doing, for example, in their fundraising. All right. Before we go to questions, Can you just, from everything that you've seen, what are some like surefire ways just to start improving a little bit? What are some just like fairly easy tactics that generally speaking tend to work?
Email people more often, like increase the frequency of how often you're communicating. Like you said, the fundraising effectiveness project, that's one of the reports that comes out annually, and it's a great report. And what it showed was that people actually wanted to be communicated with more frequently. And so, like, once a month is not enough. So just increase the amount of times you're emailing, like simple enough. Send more emails, communicate more. That's a big one. Test subject lines. I think that's an easy thing to do if your system allows you to test. Sometimes it's like more expensive to have that functionality, but your email has no value if it never gets opened. And so spend some time on creating some like really interesting subject lines, like look at what emails you've sent in the past. And it is hard to tell like open rates if they're reliable or not, but if you're comparing against your own data, it might be helpful to see like what emails are open more and what more frequently, and like what those subject lines are. That's something that's sort of easy-ish to do. Do you have any? I would like to hear what you think.
Yeah, frequency is good. Trying really personal emails that don't have a lot of branding, aren't very flashy, plain text. That's an
Yeah.
easy one to start experimenting with. We like to every now and again solicit reply backs because it improves email deliverability. If people are replying back to your email and you reply back to them, that's a signal to an email service provider that this isn't spam. This is like people are actually interacting with this domain. So reply backs, we like to, when possible, we like to do that quite a bit. And it also builds community. If the CEO is too busy to reply, that sometimes happens, somebody else can reply on their behalf, and you just start with, hey, I saw this email that you sent to the CEO. I figured you would want a speedy reply, so I'm just jumping in. So you can handle it that way. Go ahead. You look like you were
That's a
about
good
to
point.
jump in.
That's a good
Yeah.
point. I was going to say one of my clients, they have like in their email series, it's like reply back is the goal. And I asked them like, how many reply backs do you get? And they actually get quite a few, which is great. But then I ask, are you able to reply to those reply backs? And they're like, we can't keep up with it. And so, I just want to, if that's the goal, and I think that reply backs are great, but if you can't keep up with it, then it might be time to reconsider that as a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you can't reply back to it, it's worse to solicit a reply back and then just leave it in
Mhm.
cold. 3 to 4 sentence emails, sometimes very, very short updates. We always counsel clients, if you think donors are an important part of the team, every time you update your team on something, just think to yourself, is this also something I should loop my donors into?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's like, yeah, that might be it may be not for everyone. Again, segmentation, but like in the moment responsive type emails, even just like, hey, I just came out of our staff meeting, we just talked about this, I wanted you to be one of the first to know as well because it's important and your opinion matters. Every now and again we do a how are we doing email, which is literally just like, hey, how are we doing, how are we measuring up in your eyes? Do you feel like we're communicating enough? Do you feel like you know how your gift is getting to work? Do you feel like, and that always gets a lot of qualitative sort of messy replies. Messy as in messy to be like that. Qualitative data is always a little bit messy to interpret, but it's worth doing it. Yeah, sometimes switching up the sender a little bit. So if it's
Mm.
always the CEO sending, switching it up to see if that can be a bit of a pattern interrupt. Yes, it's a new person they haven't heard from before, so some people might be like not open it up because they don't recognize the name.
Hmm.
But it can be a nice pattern interrupt as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are some little
I
ways that we start.
I like the idea of those quick short emails. I think so often we feel like emails, I don't know, have to be perfect and have to be reviewed by 5 people, and, using an M dash instead of an N dash. And, you get like so in the details, but really people just want to hear from you. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be, long email, but just, yeah, more regularly. I think,
Yeah.
I think that is an easy way to improve your email program for sure.
Yeah, video is a good one too in terms of just like a short iPhone video. I know there's expensive platforms you can use to send emails to supporters, and that's great. We've seen like little iPhone videos that are pretty scrappy, perform really well.
Yeah.
So yeah, little things like
People
that.
want people want authentic, right? They want
Yep.
like the authentic,
Um,
yeah, email.
yeah. Another one for event heavy orgs. If they have an event, a lot of people are invited. Not everyone can make it to the event. Using email as a way for people who aren't at the event, it's
Hmm.
still like an easy tactic is subject line. It's called about to go on stage. And it's plain text email from the CEO. And he's like, the event is about to start. I'm about to go on stage. I'm sorry you can't be here, but I still wanted you to be part of it. Here's what we're about to unveil, or here's what we're about to announce. And there's a link to just like there's all sorts of ways where you can use email to draw donors closer into what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna give the mic to Katelyn from our team. She's been in the chat gathering questions from people, and she's gonna call people up. I know we've got a few questions here.
Thanks so much, Katelyn. I love how practical the advice was and permission giving. Thank you for reminding us just to start somewhere. We always say at Feel Good, action leads to information. And I think the suggestions that you gave today really will help us. So we're going to start with Sam. And if you're willing, Sam, to turn on your camera, I'll spotlight you and I'll let you ask your own question.
Sure. Hi. Thanks very much. Yeah, I guess one of the questions I have is sort of like, is having come from doing some fundraising, you're always trying to get to the conversion point. So is that the measure of the success of the email, or sometimes is it just depend on like what you're trying to accomplish through the email, that the success of those emails might be the fact that someone did open it and click through and that was enough? Or I mean, those are harder to measure, I guess, because it's, is it always trying to get to turning to the landing page and they're converting on whatever it is the call to action is? I'm just curious if there's things outside of that would be considered successful.
That's a great question. Yeah, it depends on the goal of the campaign or the email. And so if the goal is fundraising, of course you want to be able to look at how many conversions are happening on your donation form. You need to make sure that like your technology is set up to do that. And I think that a lot of like the smaller nonprofits maybe don't have the ability to do that. And so making sure that you have the technology that will be able to show you that from email, and you can kind of do it with UTM tracking. Like you can tell if you put a UTM code, and you know how to do that, that says the source is email, and you go into Google Analytics, you can tell how many people came from the email to the landing page. And then you have to figure out how many people from the landing page completed or converted. And that's a really important data point to have. And I think it just depends on if you're able to do that and what your goal is. And so there may be several KPIs involved in your campaign, and conversion rate is definitely one that it would be great to have that information if you can get it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, for those listening, UTM is I'm going to get this wrong, urchin tracking module. It's this little piece of code that you get to put at the end of a link. So it's kind of a unique link, and you can track where different traffic is coming from. If it's from an email or from a certain button, using different UTM parameters, you can kind of follow people around from where the traffic came from.
Wonderful. And next up, we have Quentin, if you're willing to turn on your camera so you can ask your question.
Hey, everyone. Quick question on reducing bounce rates in your emails. I often find that as you're emailing your list, depends on the segmentation, of course, but you always seem that there's a percentage that bounces. And I imagine that's something to do with keeping up the hygiene of your list. We've talked about that earlier. But do you have any other suggestions as reply backs help, or are there other things that we can do to reduce those bounce rates?
Yeah, great question. So there's two different types of bounce rates. There's a soft bounce rate and there's a hard bounce rate. And so the soft bounce rate is usually like if someone has an out of office, or if they have an issue with for some reason, their email server or something that day. But that doesn't mean that like next month they wouldn't get the email. So soft bounce rate is not terrible. And like, I would never remove those people, but a hard bounce rate is usually when that email address like no longer exists. And so there's a few really options that you have with that is there's different platforms that you can actually upload a list into, and they'll tell you how many of those email addresses are valid or invalid. If they're invalid, then I would recommend removing them or archiving them so that, you know, maybe if they come back later, they can update their email address. You can archive them within your system, or you can try to figure out what their new email is by, you know, doing some research online. Mike, do you have any other suggestions about bounce rates?
Yeah, some of it is kind of out of your hands or might not even be
Yeah.
related to your email. So if you're emailing anybody who's in like a larger institution, like universities, certain larger corporate, they have all these little spam traps. And if it's a domain that you haven't interacted with at all or not much, it might just bounce. Depending on your web team, Quentin, you can do something called authenticate your domain. Most people have that, but not everyone. So your domain could be an issue and you don't even know it. Sometimes for weird reasons, your domain gets kind of blacklisted somewhere because of something somebody did in your org. You don't even really know it. So there are some services that will just like test that for you. Yeah, just cleaning your list regularly. Certain subject lines that are spammy will get you to that. So email marketers have overused certain tactics, like putting RE, like regarding, like re something that often was used in spam a lot. So now that subject line sometimes gets you a hard bounce rate. Same with a fake forward, like an FWD. We sometimes still do that, but that can increase that too. Unless you're seeing like a massive bounce rate, I wouldn't be all too worried about it. If you're all of a sudden seeing that go up, might be that there's something wrong with your domain. Thanks, Quentin. Good to see you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Anyone can raise their Zoom hand if you are interested. Otherwise, I have Hannah from our team who has a question.
Hi. I think you guys kind of already touched on this, but one of the things I was wondering about is if you're doing your own mini email list audit and you see that you're not quite getting open rates as you were before, what are some ideas you have for creative pattern breaker senders and subject lines that could lead you towards getting more open rates?
That's a good question. Yeah, Mike touched on this. I think if your sender is like an actual person, I always suggest it being an actual person instead of the organization. And the more that you can make your email seem like it is coming from an actual person rather than a marketing email, I think that usually has really great responses. And so something that is a little bit catchy, some people may like to try to use emojis, and always have a preview text too. That's something we haven't really talked about, but there's typically, when you have emails in your inbox, there's a subject line and then there's a preview text. And if you don't have your preview text in there, the email service provider will just bring something from your email, some sentence from your email, and slap it in there. And so getting really creative about how, you know, those subject lines or the preview texts are looking, I think it will help with open rates. There are some different, and I'm just sort of started dipping my toe into AI, but there's some technologies out there that you can go ahead and ask them, you know, like set the tone of this email to be more fun or uplifting. And here's the email, and you can actually paste the email in like Chat GPT, and they'll give you like 10 subject lines or 10 pre-headers that you can, or preview text that you can choose from. And so think of how you consume email and what gets you to open an email. Like put yourself in the shoes of your audience and just be more fun and creative. I think we're a little bit stiff when it comes to sending emails.
I mine my inbox from email subject lines from my mom or from friends or from like relatives, because there's like good subject lines. It's like that's like a normal person that sent you an email, right? As long as what's in the email is in line with the subject line. If it's a subject line that's just to get you to open up the email, but the email doesn't deliver on that promise or on whatever that is, that can be a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming to Build Good Live. That's all for today. I've been taking notes. Here's my short action plan for today. It's Katelyn's 5-step framework you can use to audit your email program. Number one, if set the goal of the audit, what you actually want to find out when you're auditing your email program. Number two is just look at how many people that you've been sending emails to in the last 6 to 12 months. How many have actually interacted with your email? How many are active? How many would be considered non-active? And consider removing non-active if they just haven't been opening, interacting, doing anything for a long time. Chances are you might be paying to have them in your ESP for no reason. So put them in a series that lets them opt back in. But if they choose not to, then maybe it's time to sunset your relationship with those people, at least for now, and then focus on the active people. Number three is then look at this active list and see how does it make sense to segment and personalize the emails that we're sending out. So not everyone is getting the same email all the time. Number four is actually like categorizing it by category and start, maybe just look at what you've been doing. Are there some natural categories? Newsletters, fundraising emails, other ad hoc updates, surveys, whatever. You might have 3 to 5 categories of emails that you find yourself sending out. Look at the data for those emails, like open rates, click-through rates, how people are interacting with those emails. Maybe you'll see some patterns. Maybe you'll see some surprising patterns that what people actually open and interact with is not something you may have thought that they do. And number 5 is set your goals, your key performance indicators based on those, on the data of each of those buckets. And don't worry about what the rest of the world is saying about what KPIs are. Look at what you're currently doing and getting and see if you can improve on that. You versus you, improve on yourself. Start there as a goal. So your goal is just to get a little bit better every day. Thank you so much, Katelyn, for coming on the show. If people want to find you, where can they connect with you?
I'm mostly on LinkedIn, so that's the best place to find me.
It's Katelyn Baughan, but how do we spell your last name?
B as in boy, AUGHAN.
Well, as always, thank you everyone for hanging out with us around the fundraising campfire. If you want to be part of future Build Good Lives, simply go to buildgood.com, put in your email address. There's a bunch of ways to put in your email address. It all goes to the same place. You'll get invites for future Build Good Lives. You'll never miss one. If you're listening to this, you're my kind of people. I'm your kind of people. Thank you for the work you do. I'm your host, Mike Dirksen, cheering you on as you do good in the world. Bye, everyone.